Welcome to the Muslims in Michigan Community Conversation. I'm Jennifer White from Michigan Radio. The Muslims in Michigan project is a result of a partnership between the University of Michigan Center for Middle Eastern and North African Affairs and Michigan Radio, with support from the Social Science Research Institute. If you haven't had a chance to hear the on-air reports, you can find them on michiganradio.org. It's a series of reports produced by reporters from Michigan Radio. The website is muslimsinmichigan.org. You can find the stories there online. We hope that tonight's event will provide an opportunity for both dialogue and improved understanding of the Muslim community. Please be aware that we are videotaping and webcasting this event. We'll be taking questions from the audience here at the Arthur Miller Theater. There are microphones in the two center aisles, so if you have a question, please feel free to stand up and direct your question to the panel. You can also submit questions for our panel if you're joining via the live webcast. Questions can be submitted in the comment box right below the screen, or you can send an email to muslimsinmichigan.org. We ask that all participants be respectful of our panelists and one another, and that questions or comments be no longer than 2 minutes in length. Thank you for joining us, and now I'd like to introduce our panel. To my right, left, your right, my left, Gaida Najjar resides in Northville, Michigan as a part-time pharmacist and full-time mother to 2 young children. She is the founder of SIDRA, the Sisters Initiative and Development Reach Out Awareness Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization for women's education. To her left, we're joined by Christina Roundtree, who converted to Islam on November 17, 2006, after a post-9/11 recognition of her life's mission to educate herself for the sake of her community. She also writes for Examiner.com about Islam in Detroit and also works as a flight attendant. To her left, we are joined by Dawood Walid. He is currently the executive director of the Michigan chapter of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, a chapter of America's largest advocacy and civil liberties organization for Muslims. And to his left, we're joined by Asad Tarsin, who graduated from the University of Michigan with a BA in Arabic and Islamic Studies. During his undergraduate and postgraduate years, he studied Islamic theology, law, ethics, and spirituality with some of the nation's leading Islamic scholars. He is currently a resident physician at the University of Michigan and lives in Canton with his wife and 3 children. So thank you very much for joining us. To their left, we have another guest who is a reporter from Michigan Radio, Sarah Hewlett, who contributed to the series of stories that was on Michigan Radio. And we want to have someone here who can speak to media coverage, specifically that of Michigan Radio, of the Muslim community. So to start, let's just start with basics. When we say Muslim, when we say someone's a part of the Muslim community, what does that really mean? What does it really entail? Dawood?
First, let me say it's a privilege and an honor to be here on this panel. In regards to what it means to be in the American Muslim community, it means a number of things. It's a group, a faith group, and Muslims are those who practice and follow the religion of Islam, and of course, that following or adherence varies in degrees in regards to religiosity, whatever that ambiguous term means. But it's a group of people or person in the Muslim community who identifies with that community, who has basic beliefs that there is only one God, but one God, which we say Allah in the Arabic language, and belief that Prophet Muhammad was the last of a series of prophets that God sent to humanity, among those being Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus Christ, and Muhammad being the last, but there are many more. And that is basically a spiritual community, and there's a level of socialization within that spiritual community. In the state of Michigan, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but we have an extremely diverse Muslim community here. It's definitely not a monolith, and there's varying levels of interaction. There are some people who call themselves Muslims because they come from Muslim parents. Maybe they never go to the mosque. Maybe they don't pray regularly or fast. And then there are Muslims who go to the mosque every day to pray, or they go every Friday prayer. The Muslim community is very diverse, from African Americans to Muslims who immigrated here from Balkan countries like Albania and Bosnia, to Arab Americans who migrated from various countries, West Africans, people from the South Asian subcontinent. It's a very diverse community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, when you mentioned coming into the faith from your parents, and people identify themselves as being a part of the faith because they were born into it. How many on our panel were born into this faith, and how many actually converted?
I think I'm the only one who converted.
Mm-hmm.
When you convert and you identify yourself as a Muslim, it goes so much further beyond being a part of your community. You feel like you have a duty to yourself and your spirituality to identify with Islam and being a Muslim. I don't know about people who are born into the faith. I can't tell you how many times I've often wondered what it must be like. But for me, I know I have a lot of friends that encourage me to take pride in myself for actually finding some kind of faith basis to believe in. And not only that, but finding Islam. They give me a lot of credit for that, which I don't think I deserve. But I don't know. I don't know. Gaida, how do you feel about it?
I'm born and raised Muslim in Syria. But still, you're born, raised Muslim, but then you have to be improving yourself at a certain age and really trying to revisit your thoughts and your belief. And that was probably around the adolescent age. Mm. And that's when you start to analyze and rethink, really, what is that name? What's in the name of Islam? Being Muslim, what does it mean? And you get to the step further, which is the believer, more just not Muslim, not just the outside name or the by identity. So it's more, you think more of the belief inside, identity outside, and you learn the way of life to link all the three together.
Now, Assad, I noticed you smiled when Dawood used the term religiosity, and I want to know why you had that reaction.
I agreed with his appreciation of how challenging it is to define that term and what that means to different people. And I think part of the reason I smiled is I think the word, what it means to be a Muslim, will be different for so many people as well. Even though we can all agree that it includes a certain set of beliefs and principles and practices, what that means to each of us and how that alters each of us and how that inspires everything we do in the rest of our lives is unique. And everybody will define, well, I think it does this for me differently, and it does that for him differently, and it does that for ladies, and everybody just has their own unique experience. And I think that's part of what I appreciated, is that everybody brings to Islam something and takes something out of it. And I think it enhances what each of us are as individuals as well.
Now, I've heard the term used, I think at least once, maybe twice, monolithic. And Sarah, as someone who covers the Muslim community, do you find there's a challenge in breaking through that perception of the community as a monolith?
Yeah. I think it's tempting and easy for us to always head to Warren Avenue in Dearborn and talk to some people about what's going on. And one of the nice things about this series is that we were able to have the time and think about it a little bit ahead of time and step back and really consider what this community is and the diversity that's in it, and the fact that we have lots of Muslims living in West Michigan, and they're not, concentrated in this small area in Southeast Michigan and all look the same. And as I think a couple people on the panel have already talked about, that there is sort of a spectrum of, for each individual person, what it means to be a Muslim and how you practice your faith. And I think we kind of have touched a little bit on that in the stories that we've told this week.
We're starting to speak a little bit about the diversity within the community. And one of the things I've been thinking about is how within this group there is such ethnic diversity. How does that play out, being an American Muslim and maybe having people expect people to look a certain way when they identify with that faith, but then you have this range of ethnicities within? What is it like negotiating that space, not just with people who aren't of your faith, but also people within the community What kind of boundaries do you have within the community?
Well, I have a very rich level of interactions with people because of my position in the community. I deal with all of the various ethnic groups in the mosque all throughout the state, and at the same time I deal with a number of different civic organizations and civil rights organizations. So it's very interesting in regards to the interaction and the perceptions. In regards to the broader community outside of the American Muslim community, I've noticed that people use the term Muslim and Arab interchangeably, despite the reality that not only worldwide, but in America and in Michigan, the majority of Muslims are non-Arab. There are people who assume, and perhaps if you go through the Middle East, there are people who look like me. We were just discussing that in lower part of Egypt, and in Sudan, there are people who I look like, or in Morocco, but people assume that I'm an Arab, or sometimes I'm called Daoud Walid, the Arab leader, or the leader of the Council on Arab-American Relations. I get this all the time. So there is an overconflation in the minds of people in America and in Michigan in particular in regards to Arab and Muslim being the exact same thing, or that the issues of the Arab community, Arab-American community, are shared across the board with Muslims who are non-Arab. That's not the case. In regards to, just to sum it up, in regards to inner community, there's a number of different dynamics. I think that Muslims who were born and raised here in the United States of America, who went to school with other people of other ethnic groups, and they prayed and worshiped with Muslims from different nationalities, there tends not to be ethnic distinction or even the leaning to think that the Islam from their mother country is the authentic Islam to the exclusion of other people. Because sometimes we hear this too. Sometimes people from one group, they're used to practicing Islam a certain way in their village, in their country, and then those who practice it a little different or don't do certain things, they might say, well, they might be good people, but they don't have the real Islam. But so younger Muslims who are born and raised here don't have these type of sensitivities as much as perhaps people who newly immigrate here, where that tendency may express itself a little bit more.
Sarah, I saw that you
I just wondered if Daoud, maybe you have more of a national perspective. I wondered if that conflation is something that's very specific to Southeast Michigan, or if it's everywhere.
Because you said specifically Michigan. You said especially in Michigan.
Yeah.
You see that.
Well, especially Michigan, because Michigan has most demographers say has the highest concentration of Arab Americans in the United States, although many studies say that about half of those Arab Americans, in fact, are Christians. They're not Muslims. But nonetheless, there tends to be perhaps more of a conflation here, Sarah, in Michigan, because there are just so many Arab Americans. Yeah. And then many people think that Dearborn is the highest concentration of Muslims in Michigan. And that's not even true, because Hamtramck, Michigan, is at least 50 to 55% Muslim. So Dearborn isn't even the densest concentration of Muslims in Michigan. And even some Muslims in the community even don't even know this.
Now, Gaida, coming from Syria, do you experience the differences in the ethnicities within the community the same way as how Dawood is explaining, or do you have a different experience?
Well, my experience is different in a way where, as he said, you come from a certain area where you just learn a certain way of practicing. But honestly, I have to appreciate the land we're on, because it gives you the feeling and the understanding of the diversity, and to be the intellectual thinker in a way about Islam. And that's how I start really empowering myself Islamically here in the U.S. when I came here. Second of all, something probably about my personality being flexible is once I came here, I considered myself to be the Muslim of the West, not the Muslim in the West, which is a big difference between the two.
Explain that distinction.
Well, if I am the Muslim of the West, I do belong here. Anything I do, it's going to be witnessed by the people, by the land, by everybody around me. I belong here. So that's how I felt to keep going and be productive. And, if I need to use different methodology, that's fine. That's acceptable. If I consider myself the Muslim in the West, that means a temporary concept. I'm an immigrant, and probably one day I have to go back, and this is not my land at all. So Islamically, to me, I don't think about it this way, because my faith, my belief is not, I wouldn't get the good deed this way, basically, to use something and not be efficient and productive for a certain time, because nobody guarantee if really where we all gonna be tomorrow, U.S. or any other places. So that's the differentiation, and it does affect how you look at things. And always I say the way I see it the same way when I graduated from University of Michigan as a pharmacist. Yes, you learn till you graduate a certain way, but when you are a pharmacist on your own, you learn from other experience, and you have to really interact and give and take. So depending on the environment and the community that you are surrounded with. So that's my philosophy about my faith.
Yes, Asad.
Something that I think is interesting is I've visited and spent some time in the Muslim world. And what's interesting is the opposite isn't so true. So if you were in any random Muslim country and somebody met a Chinese Christian, that wouldn't strike them as a strange thing. And one of the reasons I think the opposite is true, where people will say, oh, Dawood Walid, you must have an Arab background, is race seems to be the primary mode of identification. And religions are confined almost to within racial boundaries, so to speak. I mean, even here we have, this is a frank conversation, we have white churches and black churches. And as President Obama said a couple years back, that Sunday mornings are still the most segregated day of the week. And I think it comes from the primary mode of identifying another is still race here because of the complex history that race and racism played. But the interesting thing is I don't think that that's true. A Chinese Christian makes perfect sense to most Muslims in a Muslim land who take a person's values or principles or beliefs as a primary mode of identification and accept that anybody could really be anything.
I do have something to say, and I think this is one thing that we Muslims can be proud of here, is that we do have a level of racial segregation amongst us, but it is nowhere as much as the broader American society. We have many mosques in Michigan, for example, the Islamic Cultural Institute, which is in the St. Clair Shores. The majority of the congregation is Egyptian, but the Imam Shamsuddin Abdul Rashid, he's an African American Imam over majority Egyptian congregation. We have similar situation where Imam Ali Layla at the Islamic Association of Greater Detroit, he's from Egyptian background, he's Egyptian American, but the majority of that congregation are people from immigrants and their children from India and from Pakistan. So when we go to Friday prayers, I know Imam Muhammad Ali Ilahi, another Imam at the Dearborn Heights Islamic House of Wisdom, he's a Iranian American, but the majority of the congregation is Lebanese American. So any Friday when we go to our services, you can see a blend, ethnic mixing, in that in many cases the imam is of a different ethnicity than the majority of the congregants in the mosque, and this is something that is one of the blessings of our religion, Islam.
Christina, I want to ask you, as someone who converted to the faith, what was your experience like coming in? Did you notice this blending of ethnicities that they're speaking about?
I definitely saw segregation, and that's because I was coming in as an American not knowing anything about the Muslim community, and what I saw was, oh, these are Pakistani people hanging out with Pakistani people, and that's all I saw. Once I got into the depth of their knowledge, and once I started going to masjids in different areas and communities, I started to see that there's a multitude of cultures and communities that come together. It wasn't until I stepped out of my lens of vision that I started to see that there were different people that come together. I think that's something amazing about America, that American Muslims are forced to go back to the principles of our religion. We can no longer hold on to the cultural practices that we were doing in different countries. Let's say I'm Iranian and I come from Iran, and I have certain cultural things that I hold on to that I think is a part of my faith, but when I get to America, I have to let go of those cultural things because now I'm going to a mosque where there's a Pakistani imam and the board of directors are made of, Arab and African American members. So I can't necessarily do the things that I might have been able to do in that country when it comes to culture, but it forces us to follow our principles a lot stronger. And I love that. I love being in Michigan and being a Muslim in America.
In Michigan, I think that there's often a perception that the North, north of the Mason-Dixon line, is more open, more understanding, more tolerant. But Michigan, clearly, we've seen some news reports recently that show that there are pockets where racism and violence and you name it, are still very prevalent. As members of the Muslim community, how much of this do you really run into? How much discrimination? How much, I don't really know what you're about. How much of that do you run into? Because frankly, if I ran into you on the street, with the exception of you because of your hijab, I wouldn't know. So how much of it do you run into when you're going about your daily life? Or do you feel that people aren't necessarily aware of how you identify unless you tell them?
I would like to start with that. Because you're not able to see that I'm Muslim and because I held onto my original name, Christina, we're not obligated to change our names when we convert. I see it more as a hidden bias toward Muslims because I can speak to a fellow American and they'll say something, perfect example, an Arab man was walking by someone I was sitting next to and the woman kind of jumped. And I said, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Oh my gosh, he just surprised me because he came out of a door I didn't even think was open. I thought maybe he was a terrorist or something." And granted, the guy looked Latino to me, but, to her, she was very scared, And so I asked her, well, what makes you think that? And we went into a conversation of racial profiling and then again, profiling or discriminating against someone because of their faith. And I see that a lot.
Well, you're a flight attendant.
Right. So it's a lot. It happens a lot more than you would think because you don't know that I'm Muslim. I don't know how it would be if they knew that I was Muslim because I wore a hijab or because my name was Fatima.
Well, for me, I have a different perspective than probably everyone on the panel because I'm the actual person in the community who intakes civil rights complaints. So I'm privy to a lot of ugly things that happen in the community that never hit the media because we don't publicize everything, only certain cases that we feel that we need to publicize and also give them permission. So I do know that there are many cases of Islamophobia and discrimination. Of course, we hear Islamophobia on radio stations and on the internet, of course. But from my personal experience of living in the city of Detroit, I'm an African American. The majority of my interaction outside of my professional life is amongst other African Americans. I don't face any problem in regards to anti-Muslim sentiments because in the African American community in Detroit, there have been Muslims for about almost a century. You probably can't name one African American family who doesn't have a relative that's a Muslim or a neighbor. So African Americans in Detroit are extremely familiar with Muslims, so it's not really a big deal for me on a personal level. I don't personally suffer much discrimination except for hate calls that come into my office or emails because I'm quoted in the media so much.
Assad?
I think it's on occasion I have experienced or witnessed certain situations, but I don't think that anybody who has been subjugated to that really takes them very seriously, to be honest with you. I think for most people it's offensive, it can be hurtful, but then you interact with the other 99% of your coworkers and friends and your day goes on and you're just like, okay, there's an idiot out there, I'm going to move on. Every once in a while you do see something, and really if we look at them properly, I think there are opportunities for more education. A lot of these comments come out of either misunderstandings or just a lack of information or people just not understanding things. And I think if we utilize these opportunities, we can really just grow as a nation. But yeah, I've seen them. I won't pretend they don't exist. A couple within the last month or two. But it happens, and you kind of use them as opportunities to actually correct somebody's misunderstanding. Like, actually, no, that's not really why so and so was doing that, or so.
And just move on.
Yeah, I agree with him. It doesn't, especially for me as a woman and as a person who wear hijab, and I practice as a retail pharmacist, so that's in direct contact with the public, and you get the educated, you get the non-educated. So the way I look at it, it's my responsibility to reach out no matter what. You hear all of these comments, oh, you go back home, or, these regular sentences that we're just, all the time we hear that. So to me, it really doesn't get into me, and I try to reach out and help. And as a matter of fact, I get a lot of appreciation also from the customers, pharmacist guided was helpful and this and that, and I get, in my company where it's more benefit for me because I did have the customer satisfaction. So really, it depends on how I look at it, and the media is educating, and some people really are ignorant, so it shouldn't be.
But do you feel like the media is educating appropriately? When you watch the news, everyone's head kind of went to the side there, but what is your perception of how the media covers your community?
I think information literacy has to step in the media somehow. Whoever doing the job of the media has to be a qualified, a higher level education, and have the information literacy talented before we even go in the media and do any publicity.
So do you mean someone who is representing the Muslim community? Or
it has to be fair equation. Nobody is very bad and nobody is very good. And there's always a two sides for a story. But to dig and get the right resources and the right information, that's very critical, I think.
But do you think that's happening now?
Well, if I can shift it a little bit, I think that we as a Muslim community really need to step up and really develop more of our own media and get our message out there. As an African American, I've always seen disparities my whole life in regards to, for example, news coverage and how crime is covered when a white male commits crime and when a young African American commits crime. And that still goes on. I think that we need to do a better job of developing our own media and getting the message out. And I'll give you a prime example. About 2 months ago in Austin, Texas, a man by the name of Joseph Stack went on an anti-government rant. He went and took an airplane, and then he flew the airplane into an actual target that he went on his government rant. And none of the media called this guy a terrorist or attached his religion to it. And similar with the Hatari movement. I mean, it means Christian militia, but in essence, they were planning terrorist attack. Now, had that guy that ran the airplane been a Muslim, that would have been a front page story. It wouldn't have been relegated to page 5B in the Detroit News, for instance. So we do see these type of double standards, and who knows how long those will continue, but I think we need to take more ownership in getting our message out as a community and less complaining about Fox News. Fox News is going to continue to be Fox News.
Sarah, as a reporter, how do you, not to put her on the spot or
That's
anything,
all right.
but,
Well, I'm here.
but how do you respond to that? How do you?
Well, that's an interesting way to put the question, because I think that it's a very legitimate complaint to say that we often are reacting to something negative that's happened. And that is sort of our entry into covering the community. This project has been really nice because it's sort of, a chance to like breathe a little and step back and say, okay, who are these folks who are our neighbors? But after the series is over, those pressures are going to be back on us, and we know, looking at the downsizing of the newspaper industry, that I think both the News and Free Press have lost their religion writers. Am I right, Dawood? They've taken early retirement.
At the Free Press.
But he's sort of general assignment. So, but my point is that we're losing these opportunities to tell these stories that can dig a little deeper, or take a little time and not just react to something terrible that's happened.
I want to pick up one of the questions that came in on the web. It's from Bernard, and he asks, are Islamic jihadists Muslim? Is their destiny the same as Mr. Rushdie or the Danish cartoonist? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. I think everyone on the panel would agree that somebody's destiny in the afterlife is God's domain. I don't think any of us will claim any hotline there to know what somebody's destiny is. But I think what's much more fruitful to discuss is whether or not certain people's actions or agendas fit within the ethical framework of Islam. And I think that I might be able to speak to, and I think that's easier to say, no, that doesn't represent the Islamic ethical framework. It doesn't represent the spirit of Islamic law, nor the letter of the Islamic law. And I don't know what somebody's destiny would be in the afterlife. Neither Salman Rushdie's nor the Danish cartoonist, nor these jihadists. But I think it's important to really, to Bernard in particular, to kind of get past a stage in which we just ask one another, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yeah.
Good or bad, good guy or bad guy? Like which team is he on? Human beings are a bit more complex than that, and I think we all know that. And to really get down into an understanding in which the intent is really to foster an environment where these things don't happen, and these things can be understood and really be cured at the root.
And yet we are in a time when groups are increasingly polarized, when there is, in the media and in other venues, there's the right, there's the wrong, there's the good guy, there's the bad guy. As you're going about your lives every day, how much responsibility do you feel to be a representative with a capital R of your faith? When you're out there, do you feel like, okay, I have to make sure they understand that I am Muslim and I'm a good person and I'm safe or whatever, so that you can shift perhaps how people are thinking. Do you feel a responsibility to do that at all?
I do big time, just because, again, I'm not born, raised American, and I have this mingling thoughts from other people as well about, is it what's destined? These people are doing bad, these people are doing good. So you get to learn, and through the Quran and through the belief, we can't tell. We can't tell. This moment belongs to God and that person, that human nature, because the repentance accepted till the last breath. So if that's whoever is seeking the truth, whether they did the bad till they get to the truth point, or they did the good to get to the truth point, it doesn't matter. So as long as that moment is something private between that human and the Creator, we do not have any job to judge anybody. But God told us in the Quran, if you are the bad, if you're doing this, this is the end result of the consequences of your actions, basically. But we're not in the position to judge others. And I do feel the responsibility to educate others, the youth, born, raised here, because they get the confusion about the identity. What should we do? My friend is, Christian or Jewish or, all of this. You can't. They are your friends. You just have to work with the outside. That's what relation is all about, relationships between the humans. You can't tell what's the inside. And there are etiquette and manners for the relationships.
It's interesting you brought up the younger generation. There's another online question from Bob who says, for the parents on the panel, do you worry your children will change from traditional Muslim culture/religious practice because they live here in the U.S.? How do you keep your culture alive? Or perhaps
I don't
faith
look at
is
Islam
better.
as culture.
So
because
faith,
if I have to do it this way, I know I'm going to lose with my children. You can't bring a culture in a different culture. You can, if you want to grow cucumber, Middle Eastern cucumber is different than the American cucumber. It's different. It's cucumber, but it's different plant, it's different seed, it's different environment. So I would not expect that from my son. I would not even, or my daughter, even they're young, and he does ask me these questions. all what I want him, and I keep saying, doesn't matter. We all believers, and we all look for God, and it's a person's choice to stray or stay on the right path. That's all what he needs to do. I'm not going to say, in the Syrian culture, this is how we do this and that. When he goes back home, he's going to sense the culture, and he senses it in a different way, and he's fine with it. It's just the exposure, but he's okay with that.
But it even sounds like in the question there's an underlying misconception. And the underlying misconception is that Islam is some type of foreign entity to America. The majority of Muslims in America were born here in America. But even those who have immigrated and had children, they've been raised and they've been molded by the broader American culture. They listen to rap music, they play video games, they play basketball, they love Kobe Bryant. So I'm saying all that to say that that question in and of itself looks at Muslims as some type of foreign or exotic entity, where in fact we are overwhelmingly American, we are acculturated, and so there's not this type of clash of cultures or clash of civilizations that many people tend to have preconceived in their minds.
I get the feeling you have this conversation a lot to do.
Well, that's because I do this as a living, so obviously I have these types of conversations.
Migration is not a new phenomena either. It's something been in the past, and it's gonna stay. It's not something new that we are bringing something new here. So,
Asad, did you want to?
Yeah, I would say that the challenges of reconciling between one's culture and their religion is something that everybody everywhere deals with. You can go into churches in America and have people really, battling with what parts of new modern culture, MTV culture and this, that, the other, and parents really struggling with dealing with these things. And you can go to the Muslim world, in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and parents are sitting down and having these same conversations about their own cultures having certain influences or tendencies that they find antithetical to their beliefs, and so they're working dealing. So to think that this is, that there is, to echo Dawood's comment, that there is just something uniquely opposed between Islam and American culture is a bit of an oversimplification. To be
Do you think that this combining of religion and culture stems from just a basic misunderstanding of what Islam is? Because
I'm American and I'm not worried about my culture right now. I mean, I'm every bit American. I was in the marching band, I was in choir in high school, I was in the Girl Scouts, got kicked out, just I'm every bit American as you possibly can get. So I'm not worried at all about my culture. I don't understand why there's such an emphasis on Islam not being of an American basis, especially since it's been here for a while.
There's not even a monolithic American culture to begin with. I was raised in Virginia, and a lot of things that we did in Chesterfield, Virginia is different from in this region of Michigan or the UP for that matter. I mean, just so many oversimplifications.
it seems like this is an ongoing issue, though, that Islam is looked at as not as a religion, but as a culture. That seems to be a pretty prevalent idea, or that for some reason people cannot separate the two in their minds. Is it something that you think is being perpetuated by the media, or is go ahead.
I personally think that trend does definitely exist, but I also do want to echo Sister Ghaida's comment earlier, which is where it's also just the immigrant phenomenon. You have a large part of our community which immigrated. My parents immigrated. I have grandparents who are alive who live in Africa, another continent. So that's a reality. I speak another language. So I think it's just a matter of time when something is new to really get used to it and then start to realize, oh yeah, Muhammad Ali. Oh yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Oh yeah, I guess I made a mistake there. I take that back. And so I just think it's something that's going to fade with time. There were people who once saw blacks in America as just, a different culture, foreign to America somehow. And I just think it's just a matter of time, exposure, and education. And I do think that the media, and when I say the media, I don't just mean the news industry, or, I mean, media has many facets to it, but I do think media plays a role. I'd love to see a more responsible media, which is genuinely interested in a proper portrayal of the truth, and just having more dialogue that I think is fruitful. But yeah, I grew up my whole life having to repeat my name 3 times, right? And for the first time in my life, I was like, hey, my name's Assad. Oh, like the terrorist on 24? Oh, so now people know my name. Great. Wow. I'm glad to know that. So that's, which is, I mean, that's, it's a show, it's entertainment, but you realize, like, wow, nobody had ever heard my name before, and for 30 years, and now people are starting to recognize my name as this villain terrorist on the show 24.
You're remarkably philosophical about that, Assad.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, I mean, I don't say it as a put down at all, but
okay.
You are remarkably philosophical about that, and I wonder if I would be as philosophical, or any other person would take it in stride quite that well. No, it's nothing to apologize for, but I'm trying to key in on how you're able to take it in stride that simply. It seems like there's some transition that happens in your mind where you're able to just sort of go, okay. And I'm trying to key in on, is it a defense mechanism? Is it something you've learned to do?
I think it's something that I've learned. I think being the child of immigrants is pretty fortunate. You realize that nothing is as simple as people want to make it. So I used to get the question, are you Libyan? Well, yeah, no, well, hold on, I can't just answer it in one word. Are you American? Yeah, well, yeah, I can't answer that in one word. And what I started to realize is that most people can't answer most things in one word, except, very simple questions. Do I love my parents? Do I love my wife, etc. But we're all complex people. I'm a very complex person, And I think one of the things I realized, I think it's very fortunate, is you realize it's the history of this country. We are a very special country here. And when you go to school and you see people hit with water hoses and have dogs sicked on them, and you realize what it really takes to get your place in this country, so what? The guy just called me, a raghead. I mean, that's not a water hose. And it's just a matter of time before these attitudes change. Because I think our country has proven that we can get over these things. That noise just doesn't survive here,
And one thing, and I stress this to a lot of audiences, and especially since I'm a product of parents who were involved in the civil rights movement and came through that time. And actually, my mother went to segregated schools. The challenges that my parents and grandparents went through, and there was a price to be paid, but those things just didn't go away on themselves. People stood up, people sacrificed, people went to jail, people were ridiculed, and some people even lost their lives. And for the Muslim community to overcome some of these things, in my opinion, in my work, there has to come a time where we have to stand up and say, no, this country is just as much ours as anyone else's. And I'm not just going to let you talk about me or treat me any old kind of way. I'm a human being. I'm an American, and some of us may get fired from our jobs. Some of us may go to jail for it. But I think that this is one of the moral challenges for our community. Are we going to stand up and face this challenge and assert ourselves as humans and as Americans, or are we going to passively? And I'm not saying that Brother Assad was saying this, but there is a type of feeling amongst some people in our community that we should just go to our mosque and just pray and read the Quran and go to our jobs, and everything is going to work itself out in time. It doesn't work that way in America. So from my experience, we have to get out of our cocoons more and our safe spaces and stand up for what we believe in, but not in a hostile manner, but yet very strong and assertive.
Is it difficult, and I would ask anyone on the panel to respond to this, is it difficult to straddle that line, though? If people approach you and they're already somewhat defensive, somewhat standoffish, a little concerned, is it difficult to have that conversation with someone because they might think, uh-oh, he's gone, she's already there? Because, I mean, you're dealing with some very sensitive issues. You don't know what sensitivities other people may have. it sounds like that would be a very difficult line to straddle because you don't want to be perceived as, and I'm assuming this, angry. Oh, they're angry. Why are they so angry? How do you negotiate that kind of conversation?
When you're having something of that nature, when you're dealing with a situation of that nature, you have to step back and just kind of be a person at that point. You know, when it's political, when it has to do with your society, you have to sometimes take a back seat to your, I think we all have it in America, this strong sense of being Muslim. You have to kind of take that as a back seat and approach that person who has kind of a defense ready and rearing to go, and just be a person with them. Because I think a lot of times people, when they're ready to have a fight, they don't see you as someone, they see you as a target they need to get through, or a goal they need to just run over, you know. So I don't think that a lot of Muslims in Michigan especially, I've seen, have a problem with stepping out of the box. I think a lot of us can sit down and actually speak to someone about their angers and their frustrations with what they've been seeing in the news, and they say, you know, my grandmother was in that tower in 9/11, Tower 2, and I just don't understand where these people are coming from. What are you going to say to that? Well, in Islam, in verse blah, blah, blah. No, you're going to sit there and you're going to say, I'm deeply sorry. And what else can you do at that point, really?
Again, you have to use the appropriate communication skills from a human nature to a human nature, basically. Aggressive behavior versus anger versus, it just doesn't matter, Muslim, non-Muslim, it doesn't matter. It could be any angry person. So I personally step back and just deal with it on a communication skills level, basically.
If there are questions in the audience, please feel free to approach one of the microphones at any time.
Could I add a last comment
Absolutely.
to just this part of it? I think for myself personally, there's kind of two things that I try to keep in mind, which is you try to distinguish between what might turn into a fruitful conversation versus one which just doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. And so, you know, there are times in which it is very important to take a stance and even make a public kind of declaration that this is unjust or unfair or intolerant, etc. And then you need to distinguish between just one person who, you know, for whatever reason is behaving in an inappropriate way. I mean, it's something we Muslims ask people to do all the time. Don't judge our entire diverse, you know, 1.2 billion, you know, person community of believers on, you know, 0.00001% of them, please, you know. So I think that's one thing, is I try to distinguish between, could this turn into a fruitful engagement, or is this not going to be worth anyone's time? And the second, I think, is really something I get from my faith, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was somebody who was always an optimist regarding human nature. He really didn't give up on people, you know. And I believe that all of us, you know, all of the people that I work with, all my coworkers, all my neighbors, all the people I went to school with, that if we just sat down and had a reasonable conversation, we could all really get along pretty easily and learn to respect one another. And it's just about trying to create those scenarios and being patient until those opportunities arise. But just really having that optimism that people are just innately good, and if they were given a shot, they probably would see your point, you know, and you would see theirs, and you would be like, oh, I guess we agree more than we disagree, huh?
Yes, sir.
Hello, thank you. My question is about imams. At the start, several people mentioned the imam, and many of the cases, the imams were from other countries. So my question really relates to what you've been saying, which is, what would be needed so that in this country there would be the kind of educational institution that would allow people to say, I am qualified to be an imam? Or that really there would be more education, because as you said, there are some already. Is that something that's going to happen within 20 years, or what do you think?
Well, I want Daoud to comment on that, but I just wanted to say one thing. It is in the process and being worked on. It's a concern of mine, so personally, that's one of my goals too. I feel like, well, in the Canton community, because that's where I'm from, what I have been seeing is a lot of people standing up and saying, listen, even though we do have a lot of scholars that are very important to our community and been very helpful and insightful, we do need some kind of set regulations to say, okay, we need you to be able to speak English well enough so that people can understand you, number one. Number two, we need you to come from a knowledgeable and educational background that is appropriate to being an imam in America. Number three, you need to be able to relate to your community. So I believe that if not already implemented, I believe that it is definitely in the works nationwide.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem, even for our children, because they have. If you want to define something Islamically, there are too many resources and different resources within the mosque. There are differences. This person will say, okay, this is okay to do or not okay, and somebody else will say this is okay or not okay. And again, it's just a different background. Mm-hmm. So as a community member, we do see the urgency in getting there, hopefully sometime soon.
Sarah, you had a question?
It's a follow-up question to the question about the imams. In the reporting I did for this series, I kept coming upon people talking about scholars, and I just wanted somebody to talk about the role of scholars in the community, especially here. It seems like it's...
A scholar is a person who can, again, by definition, just to take the information from the solid information, the trusted information, and be able to integrate it with I think, what's needed in the American culture for the American Muslim, basically.
Are they viewed as leaders, though?
The leaders, or just you mean the scholars from, who are the scholars that you
I
met?
think she's talking about the importance of scholars within Islam.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there's a saying of Prophet Muhammad that the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So many Muslims, we believe in a passing down of chain of spiritual knowledge and understanding that goes back to the Prophet Muhammad and was passed down from generation to generation through scholars in regards to authentic spiritual beliefs and practices within Islam. So the role of a scholar is very important, and real scholars have something what's called ijazah, that they get permission to teach certain subjects based upon what was passed down to them through a chain of scholars. Part of the problem that we've seen in the Muslim world is that you have people giving religious opinions, are called like a fatwa. They give a religious opinion, and some of these people don't have the proper ijazah, don't have the proper connection to the classical Islamic scholarship. Then they make opinions. They read one verse from the Quran or one saying of Prophet Muhammad and take it totally out of context. Like Osama bin Laden, for example. He's not an Islamic scholar. I have, Brother Asad and myself, we have more Islamic education than Osama bin Laden. I can say this for sure. But he gives a proclamation, and then you have people who believe that their religion tells them they can go into a mosque and blow up other Muslims during Friday prayer. So the scholar is very important, and Muslims who go to the mosque regularly, or questions regarding marriage, in regards to family, child rearing, all these different types of issues, they'll go to the scholar and they'll ask a question, and they seek the scholar to explain the Islamic tradition to them and how they can apply that tradition here in America.
To add, answers both your question and the gentleman's question. I think that process is definitely underway. I think very well underway. Some of the most influential Muslim scholars / leaders, to kind of, I think it's a term we use in a certain way, and we know what kind of importance it has. Some of the most influential Muslim thinkers today are American / Western thinkers and scholars. They are invited to the Muslim world, in the heart of Al-Azhar in Cairo, the 1,000-year-old university, the heart of studying in Islam, and they're invited there to lecture and engage. So definitely, I think the existence of American scholars, people born here, trained and qualified, is definitely gaining some momentum. And the first American Muslim university actually opens this fall, and will be training imams and scholars. So the first university that's going to be accredited is opening, and I think you'll see kind of an exponential rise on the curve, hopefully, for that. But that already exists. I mean, there are dozens of Western, when I say Western, I want Western Europe, Canada, and the United States, very qualified, well-trained Muslim scholars that are respected all throughout the world. And I don't think that's an exaggeration by any means.
Mm-hmm. We have another question.
Did you put enough weight on the idea of going out to the community and having events where people with fear of the other and with ignorance will get to know people. Like we invited Imam Walid to an event where a rabbi, an imam, and a reverend were talking about a moral issue in their holy books. And we is the ICPJ, Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice. All the churches in town in Ann Arbor are part of it, and a lot of Muslims members, but not an organization. Actually, the student Muslim organization cooperate with us in events. Like next week on Thursday, we have women, Muslim women. The event is called Daughters of America. And the Muslim women are going to come and talk about the Muslim society and how they feel in the community, and as women and as Muslims. And they are all very professionals, MDs, lawyers, Muslim ladies. And it's very important for people to see it and to feel that these are people just like you and are even better than you. So please come next Thursday to the library.
Nice little plug
the
there.
Michigan Library, the Ann Arbor Library, the main library, at 7 p.m.
Do you feel like, well, she's walking away now, but do you feel like there's enough of that conversation being had right now? Do you feel like there needs to be more of what we're doing today?
I think there's enough conversation starters. I don't think there's enough activism in the community. As you can see here, we could have a full auditorium, but unfortunately, we don't have enough people who are willing to engage in that conversation. Now, I don't mean to bring any disrespect to anyone, because maybe they're misinformed, maybe they don't have enough information about the events. So you never know where we're lacking in terms of getting people to come out, but I definitely think there's a lot of conversation starters. I actually, I remember I used to be a part of an organization when I was in college, and what we would do is every year in the wintertime, we all Muslims, we would, and it was usually, well, during the times that I was in college, it happened during Ramadan, it's before I converted. They would go early in the morning, they would set up tents, and they would go downtown Detroit, and they would just give out clothes, food, medical care to the homeless. So in that way, I think it kind of started, it was a conversation starter as to, okay, well, what are you people doing here? And what's this Islam all about? And I think that in these kind of circumstances, there's a lot of reaching out. There's a lot of reaching out in other situations, but that's one that I really remember.
Yes.
Just on a much smaller level, and I'm speaking now as Sarah Hewlett, just person, not reporter, but I feel like we non-Muslims need to just not be afraid to ask questions. I think that's what really hinders our understanding about a lot of things, but especially Islam. I think there's just a lot of reluctance to offend.
Why do you think that reluctance is there, Sarah?
I don't know. I think people are afraid to offend other people, and I also feel like people don't want to look ignorant. So.
Well, if I can say, the Council of Islamic Organizations of Michigan is going to be having open houses all throughout the state, and part of the purpose of having these open houses is to invite people from the broader public to come and ask those questions. And they've been somewhat successful, but this is, I'm saying, on air right now on May 15th. It's anyone who's interested can go to ciomonline.org, and they can get a list of the mosques throughout the state that are going to be participating, where they can come and ask questions and just take some of the mystery out of what of a mosque is, because most Michiganians are Michiganders. I haven't figured out the right way to say it yet. But they have never stepped foot into a mosque before, and there's some type of strange, people have some type of strange understanding about what we do in our mosque, and they go in, oh, this is what you do, this is how you pray, or there's halls that we have, oh, you actually sit and eat and socialize in your mosque. I mean,
There are just a lot of basic questions, you know, like when the first time I went into a mosque, I wasn't sure what to do. Like, I see people have all their shoes over here, you know, like just very basic stuff, you know. It is a little intimidating.
Yeah, and I think that just to jump on what you said, Sarah, about not wanting to appear ignorant, but I also think that people may not always be certain of the reception they're going to receive. I said to you, Asad, that you were surprisingly philosophical, but I think there is this fear that if I ask you, you might think I'm asking in a way that is confrontational, when it may just be curiosity. And that's definitely a hurdle that we have to get over. We have one more question from the web we're going to take. It's from Deborah. She asks, how is alcohol consumption handled in medical situations where it is used as part of medical care in American hospitals?
Doctor?
It's a controversial.
Yeah.
It's a controversial, basically.
There aren't too many cases in which alcohol is required to be given. There are. They're very few. But I would just say, instead of answering very specific legal questions, there is definitely the principle in Islamic law that that for the preservation of health, some of these what are default prohibitions can be lifted for to save someone's life or for medical care, etc. So I think in general, people will sometimes think that Muslims don't ever bend the rules and are very stringent, but Islamic law is actually pretty flexible and has a common sense to it, which says you're on a desert island, you're dying, and you found a bottle of wine. Guess what you're supposed to do? Yeah. So I mean, it's now I don't know anybody. I've never met a Muslim who's been on a desert island and dying of thirst and found a bottle of wine. But it still is. It's an important concept to understand that Muslims are actually very practical about how they try to live their life in accordance with what they believe God wants out of them.
Actually, the Quran has this exemption in regards to pork. We're forbidden to eat pork, but we're told that, if we're starving, we can eat pork. We're just not supposed to like it. And when something better comes along, you might not like asparagus, but if you come across some asparagus, then leave the pork alone and eat some asparagus, even though you might not like asparagus. So, I mean, just backing up what he says, we're actually told this, that the Quran and Islam does teach us flexibility and common sense, really.
Yeah. There's a question?
My name's Roger Gallerini, and my question is going to maybe blur the lines of culture and faith-based, but I work at an advertising agency, and it probably doesn't come as any surprise to anybody in this room that major corporations in America, all of them have departments that have a special diversity department of how to market to African Americans or to the Arab American groups, and that's why it's blurring the line here, but I think there is a connection here. What corporations in America stand out as exemplary examples of catering in a responsible way to the Muslim or the Arab American community, or African American community for that matter, and what corporations and what types of messaging do you hear and you say, I'm not buying it?
It's an interesting question. I almost think that maybe the hesitation is an answer in and of itself, and that nothing's jumping to mind.
Well, because the marketing's been so poor towards the Muslim community that when we see one small thing, it makes us jump for joy. For example, Best Buy told us Eid Mubarak, Happy Eid, and then the Muslims were sending around this poster around the internet all throughout, we have to congratulate, we all have to go and buy extra stuff from Best Buy because they said Eid Mubarak to us, or Happy Eid. So this is like one example. I mean, but of course there's been, I'll tell you, let me use an example of how culture and religion have been blurred and how Islamophobia can turn an advertiser away from marketing in general, or even using a cultural symbol as a fashion statement. A little over a year ago, Dunkin' Donuts pulled an ad, and Rachel Ray, the female who has the cooking show, she had on a black and white keffiyeh that's like an Arab symbol, primarily used by Palestinians. So some people contacted Dunkin' Donuts and say that this scarf this is a symbol of terrorism. So Rachel Ray got attacked, and then Dunkin' Donuts ended up pulling the ad simply because of the kifaya. That was very disappointing, but it showed a lot in terms of the how a cultural symbol has been misappropriated to, or been concretized to exemplify terrorism when that has nothing to do with terrorism. At the same time, this company pulled an ad just because of a cultural symbol that is associated with Arab Americans.
Was there any pushback from the Muslim community to try to correct that assumption before the ad was pulled? I don't know that you can speak to what was done nationally, but do you know of any pushback from the community to say, wait a second, you're misreading this, let us make some clarifications for you about what that scarf does or does not mean?
I was aware of some email campaigns, but I think it was all of this was known after the fact. That, you know, it was kind of a post-mortem discussion, so to speak. And I think that there were some efforts, and I think it just reminded everybody of people using easy identifiers to really either villainize or vilify, perhaps, you know, people. But I would say that one thing that I've noticed is there's a local Ann Arbor corporation, the University Bank, has catered to the Muslim, has found a demand and catered to the Muslim community. So in the Muslim faith, just like certain segments of the Judeo-Christian faith, usury is seen as an unjust and kind of forbidden, and therefore forbidden transaction. It's seen as, you know, somebody oppressing another through, you know, keeping the have-not in the have-not status for a long time and squeezing them dry. And so usury is something that is pretty severe, you know, pretty clearly forbidden. And the University of Bank, a non-Muslim corporation, basically provides alternative structures for mortgages. And, you know, my parents own a home through this. They're called Islamic mortgages. And, you know, they're considered more ethical to us. And I think if I had to, and I'm by no means a spokesperson for the Muslim community, if I had to guess if there's one thing that would attract the Muslim community, it's knowing that something ethical is supported. So I don't think there is a color or a puppet character that would catch a Muslim eye, but definitely, you know, when we think of things, you know, alcohol companies or I don't know, something that has any nudity to it or just its message, that's going to turn off the Muslim community. Something that's ethical, that might have, you know, I think it was Volkswagen had a commercial. I don't remember who it was, so maybe I shouldn't say who it was. There was a commercial where somebody, you know, trips over the curb and somebody grabs them, picks them up, and they smile at them, and somebody sees that good deed happen, and they're just smiling. So they see something else happen, and they help someone, and it's kind of this pass it forward. What was it?
Liberty Mutual.
Liberty Mutual, I think it was. And everybody smiled. It had nothing to do with what they were selling, but I just think as a Muslim, I was just like, that was a cool commercial. You know, it wasn't lewd, it wasn't indecent, it wasn't objectifying somebody's body. And I think to a certain extent, those things tend to vibe with Muslims, that what might be considered good old-fashioned, you know, being a good person was a way to sell something. So.
I think if Wendy's could have their fish sandwich all year round, and not just during Lent, I would love them for it. I would adore them for it. That's something that I have been wishing for years. Please, Wendy's, do it. And every single time Lent is over, I swear, the day after Easter, I go and I ask for that fish sandwich, and it's gone.
It's gone.
And I get so angry, I spin out, and I leave. And I honestly, now that I think about it, I actually don't go back to Wendy's until it's lit, because I love that fish sandwich.
Well, if Wendy's is one of your clients, I think you have
Really, I don't think I do.
Well, speaking of the Islamic mortgages, there's one of the stories in the radio series focuses on that topic. And you can find that story and the rest of the series at MichiganRadio.org or MuslimsInMichigan.org. If you haven't listened to the radio series, and I'm not speaking as an employee of Michigan Radio, but as a listener of the station, it is really very, very interesting. And I think there's some important information there that everyone could enjoy. So please check out that website. I'd like to thank Sarah Hewlett, Asad Tarson, and Dawood Walid, Christina Roundtree, and Gaida Najjar, for joining us today, and thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. We hope that you will visit the website. Thank you to our partners, the Center for Middle Eastern and North African Studies, in this project. There will be more in the speaker and film series over the course of the year. There's an event with the BBC coming up. Is it next month, Tamara? In June, where we'll be having a conversation about news coverage of the Arabic world. So we hope you'll stay on track with those events and join us at a later date. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for participating. Have a good evening.